Hello and welcome to this astrological forecast for November 2024. In this live stream, I am going to first present a brief overview of the month. Then we are going to pull up some charts and look at things in more detail. And finally, at the end, I'll have some concluding remarks and take any astrologically relevant comments or questions. I initially wanted to do this last night, but ran into some unexpected issues and delays, and so I decided it would be better to do it tonight instead. So without further ado, let us begin. Now, please give me one moment while I make sure that everything is working. Okay, looks like this is my stream. Oh, they're playing an ad for me. Okay, fine. Hello there, Garvino. And it looks like, or it sounds like the sound is working. Okay, so I'm just gonna mute that. And what I'm gonna do is, much of the time I'm gonna have the chat hidden, not because I don't wanna read all of your lovely comments, but just because it helps me concentrate better. But then what I'll do is I will occasionally, periodically, look at the chat, and I'll be happy to reply to any comments or questions as we proceed. Okay, so let's see here. All right. So first, let me just attempt to give an overview of the astrology of this month. Where to begin? November 2024. It is a very intense month, that's for sure. We have, among other things, Mars opposing Pluto, something that we have been dealing with for some time now. And if you have been watching my videos, you have seen me talk about significantly. Why does it say we have no data? I don't know, seems like it's working. Just a second. Okay, well, that was weird. Anyway, you'll have to bear with me because this is live. So we have Mars opposite Pluto, and that's perfecting on November 3rd, and we'll get into that more here in a little bit. But this creates a very relevant backdrop for the type of energy that we're dealing with this month, as it stirs up our fears and insecurities about what is hidden, about what is deep and dark and powerful, and these sorts of things. We have a powerful new moon that we'll be getting to in a moment. We have Mercury stationing retrograde at the end of the month in Sagittarius. And so that will be like an extended focus in the Sagittarius part of our charts. And again, we'll get into more detail about that later. But, oh, and then of course we have Pluto into Aquarius on the 19th. So this month is a pretty big deal. It's not the end of any story, but it is a very important chapter in what we are going to experience, and not just this month, but in the weeks, months, years even to come. So at this point, I guess that's about all I have to say for my summary, and we're going to now look at some charts, check the comments. Hey there, Ryan. You love my shirt? Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm glad you like it. Thank you so much for being here tonight. All right, so give me one moment while I switch over to the chart. Yes, the screen is meant to go black right now. I have to make these edits live because that's the only way I could figure out how to make it work. The black void, yes, indeed. All right. Now, in going over the astrology of November, so we're not quite going to go through every single day, but there are a number of events here that I've made notes of. And it's a pretty thorough overview of the month, but I stopped just short of going through day by day because I didn't want to overwhelm people who watch this with too much detail, and then you end up not knowing what the hell to expect this month. So let me take a sip of my green tea and we shall proceed. And again, I'm going to be checking in with the chat between every couple of examinations that we go through here. So we begin, of course, with the new moon in Scorpio on November 1st that you can see here. So the new moon is a new beginning. It is the start of a whole new cycle. This is like a seed that is planted that sets the tone for the days and weeks to come. And it culminates at the full moon in 2 weeks. And then its energy will begin to wane somewhat, but still be with us until the next new moon, which is technically on December 1st, but it's just like an hour or two, at least in the Eastern time zone, into December. So it's kind of the night of November 30th. So it's sort of relevant for this month as well, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, this, think of how I want to do this here. This new moon on November 1st, today, is a very deep, dark, powerful, secretive seed that is planted. And it sets that kind of a tone for the month ahead. If you notice in the chart in front of us, it is, of course, trine Saturn, which gives it an element of stabilization, yes, but also, I suspect, a certain level of sobering reality. And if you watched my overview for today, I mentioned that in that video as well. It's like in the weeks to come, we're going to be introduced in a much more immediate and obvious way to the weight of reality, for better or worse. And so that is the new moon in Scorpio. Okay, check on the chat. Spoonful of Nutella sounds delicious. You get your first snowfall coming tomorrow. That's exciting. It's the influence of Saturn, the coldness of Saturn on the new moon. It's bringing extra cold and snow to the applicable parts of the world. All right. Now, our next event that I want to look at is on November 2nd, when Mercury enters Sagittarius. And so you can see it right here by 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. We have Mercury into Sagittarius, which takes our thoughts into more optimistic, far-seeing, and big picture realms. So in other words, when Mercury was in Scorpio, our minds were much more focused on the depth, the intensity, getting to the bottom of things, seeing the deep, dark truth of things. Now, when Mercury enters Sagittarius, it kind of leaves a lot of that behind, and our minds are far more focused upon, let's think optimistically and see the big picture of things. Now, of course, that optimism will be dampened somewhat by other aspects that we have developing this month, but we'll get to those when we get to those. But overall, there's a tone shift when it comes to our thinking, our communication, anything we read, write, study, travel as well. And I also want to mention that as Mercury enters Sagittarius, it becomes opposite by sign to its ruler Jupiter, thus giving Mercury and Jupiter mutual reception at this time, which is quite beneficial. It's still an opposition, which is challenging, but I think it's going to make Mercury's time in Sagittarius, which is extended due to the upcoming retrograde, an easier event for us all to navigate, that would otherwise, without that mutual reception, like if Jupiter was in some other sign, not be quite so easy. Or if Jupiter was in any other sign than Gemini or Virgo, I should say. All right. So that is Mercury into Sagittarius. Now, here in the United States, you might have noticed my first chart said Eastern Daylight Time specifically. The clocks change to Standard Time on the 3rd, and so I have a separate chart here for Standard Time for us to animate going forward, where we will look at the astrology in the proper time frame. Now, how's the chat doing? Interested in the chart for 11/11, 11/22? Well, we will have to look at those. I do have something specifically for the 11th, not for the 22nd, but remind me when we get to the 22nd if I forget, and we can look at the 22nd specifically. All right, now, on November 3rd, we do have a very interesting, what's the best word for this? Dovetailing of events, coinciding of events, and that is Mars opposite Pluto, Venus opposite Jupiter, and Mars into Leo, all on the same day. So this is definitely important. It's not every day that we have, 2 or 3 big events like this occurring on the same day. So first and foremost, November 3rd is going to be a very big day. My voice requires some more tea. Sorry if that's distracting, but my voice would not survive this if I was not drinking something right now. Okay, so with the Mars opposite Pluto perfecting, this is a pretty big deal. This is something that has been building up for some time now, and it is not just about November 3rd. It is not going away. This is something that will continue to be with us for months to come due to Mars' upcoming retrograde. And this is the first of only 3 hits. So this is like the first main event in an ongoing story that will have about 3 main events. And I don't have the exact dates in front of me, but I believe the second opposition is in early January, and the third and final opposition is, I believe, in April. And so that is when this type of energy will peak. So you're probably wondering, just what the hell does this actually mean? Well, Mars opposite Pluto stirs up our fears, our insecurities about control and manipulation, our fear of what is hidden, and even anger and paranoia. You have Mars, the planet of anger and action and aggression and assertion, being pitted against, being challenged by Pluto, the planet of deep, dark transformation and unearthing things that are hidden, the planet of control and hidden power structures and this sort of thing. It's a very big deal. I don't really know how else to put it. Again, this isn't just about November 3rd. It's also a very important signature of the energy in general that we're dealing with in these days and weeks and months to come. But I would be surprised if we didn't see some interesting sparks fly on November 3rd specifically, especially because, again, at the same time, we also have that Venus opposite Jupiter the very same day. Now, this is different. Venus is opposing Jupiter from Sagittarius, with Jupiter again in Gemini. This opposition technically says our relationships or how we relate to others is challenged to expand or grow in ways that may be difficult or uncomfortable. And it can also relate to our pleasurable pursuits and pursuit of satisfaction. Those are also Venusian things. Those could be challenged to expand or grow in difficult or uncomfortable ways. Creative endeavors, artistic pursuits, these sorts of things. Now, the interesting thing, though, about the Venus-Jupiter opposition is that this is a far more optimistic aspect. Even though, yes, it's an opposition, Venus and Jupiter are the two benefics. They bring blessings and good fortune, generally speaking. So what's so interesting to me, again, is that on November 3rd, we have both Mars opposite Pluto and Venus opposite Jupiter on the same day. Now, if you are well-versed enough in astrology to understand your chart, or at least a little bit about your chart, then I can tell you that as far as the Mars-Pluto opposition is concerned, if you have personal planets and or other sensitive points in the late cardinal signs, then the Mars-Pluto opposition is going to hit those hard, and you're going to feel that deep intensity that is stirred up by that opposition. If, on the other hand, with the Venus-Jupiter opposition, you have personal planets and or other sensitive points around the mid-late mutable signs, then the Venus-Jupiter is going to hit you harder. And while, yes, it might be a little challenging, it's also going to be most likely more beneficial overall. Now, my strongest expectation with this particular development is that we're all, or most of us, are probably going to get a dose of both in varying levels, where we'll see one or two areas of our lives having this intense challenge to transform, as indicated by the Mars-Pluto opposition, and another area or two of our lives will have something much more beneficial and satisfying occurring, as indicated by the Venus-Jupiter opposition. So it really depends on your chart and how it hits you individually. But overall, November 3rd should be a very interesting day. And as if that wasn't enough, and I'm going to check your comments here in a little bit, but as if that wasn't enough, we also have, and I'll just animate the chart so you can see it real quick, Mars entering Leo the same day. Well, we technically went into November 4th here, but as you can see the cursor down here, Mars has entered Leo by the end of November 3rd. Let me just manually type in, I think it's actually 11:10 p.m. if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, there it is. By 11:10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, November 3rd, we have Mars into Leo. So this is a number of things I want to say about this. This is largely a good thing, first of all, because it takes pressure off of the Mars-Pluto opposition. So just as we experience some intense event, likely related to that on the 3rd, we're also going to, in the days following that, experience a lessening of that intensity, because while Mars still remains opposite Pluto by degree and will continue to remain as such, it is no longer opposite by sign, and that counts. Now, later in the month, once Pluto returns to Aquarius on November 19th, Mars will be opposite Pluto by sign and degree again, and that's when things are going to get stirred back up. So if you didn't understand what I just said, then just understand this. Things are going to get really intense on or around the 3rd. Then there's probably going to be a lull, a decrease in the intensity. And then on or around the 19th, expect things to ramp up again. That's kind of an oversimplification, but that's basically what I'm getting at with this whole idea. Now, Mars into Leo, this is good for Mars, However, what's good for Mars, it's questionable if it's good for us in general, as Mars is a malefic and thus therefore stirs up a lot of trouble, typically for us, not always, but very often. Mars did not like being in Cancer because, first of all, it's technically in its fall in that sign, which means it struggles to do well in Cancer. Mars has to hold things in more in Cancer. When Mars is in Cancer, its usual instincts of wanting to assert itself and take action and push forward, they're held inward much more, which makes the opposition to Pluto that much more dangerous, in my opinion, because Pluto is just pushing that Mars harder and harder and harder and harder until finally it's probably just going to burst. And however that manifests in our personal and also in our personal lives and also in the world at large is anyone's guess, but I'll leave that to your imagination. Now, once Mars enters Leo, well, now it's freed from the constraints of Cancer. Now, even though Leo may not be one of Mars' signs, like home signs or exaltation signs, Mars in Leo is much more comfortable overall. Now it is much more free to express and assert itself in the way that it wants to. Now, what that looks like for all of us individually will vary, but I'm not going to get into the details of that too much because it would be a bit of a distraction. I do find it kind of interesting. I don't know if other astrologers are considering this as important or not, but I consider it potentially important. The fact that once Mars enters Leo, let me see if I can emphasize this on the screen here. Once Mars enters Leo, it becomes square by sign, again, sign-based aspects, to Uranus in Taurus. Uranus, the planet of sudden, shocking, unexpected developments, the planet of rebellion. Well, even though it's a far cry from being square by degree, and that's not going to happen anytime soon due to the upcoming Mars retrograde, it's still square by sign. So is that going to stir up some intense anger and rebellion and people fighting for their freedom from perceived forces that are trying to limit it? Oh, I wouldn't be surprised. I'll just say that, especially again with that lingering Mars-Pluto opposition. And I don't want to sound like a broken record with that, but I cannot emphasize enough the importance of an aspect like that. All right, so how are you guys doing in the chat? Gods. Okay. Sure, thank you. Thank you for promising to remind me. All right. So I guess I could also pull up the chat on my tablet in front of me if I wanted to, although I don't know, it seems to have disappeared on here. Oh, there it is. Okay, well, we'll see what happens as we go. I'm going to try to do one of these streams at the end of every month from now on if I can handle it. So, I don't know. Bear with me while I learn how the fuck to even do this. Okay, so our next main event is on November 7th. So let's move forward to there. And it'll bring us back to the noon chart. And that event is the moon's reactivation of the Mars-Pluto opposition. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because we just went over this same kind of material, but I just want to emphasize that on November 7th, the moon, as it passes through Capricorn, and I'll animate that a little bit for you, is first going to conjoin Pluto just before 6 p.m. Eastern time. And then it's going to oppose Mars just after 8 p.m. Well, the point of that being, whenever the moon passes over something like that and forms these major hard aspects, or any aspects really to any other planets, it's reactivating whatever it touches. So November 7th, it's hard for me to gauge exactly how much this might stir things up, but the astrology would suggest there's something that occurs that day. Again, could be in our individual personal lives, could be on the world stage at large, could be both. In many cases, probably will be both, that emphasizes the fears of what is deep, dark, and hidden, and our desire to take action to protect ourselves from them, or some people might even want to lash out at them. With this whole Mars-Pluto opposition territory that we're in now and are going to continue to be in for months to come, unfortunately, most people don't consult astrologers, and so most people aren't going to hear this, and so I don't know how much of a difference it's even going to make for me to issue this warning. At least, I guess it'll make a difference for those who watch this stream, but this is really a time when we want to be careful to try to keep our anger in check and not lose our temper and not give in to irrational fear, because it's very easy when Mars is opposite Pluto to just feel like everything's against you, and to feel like there are hidden forces or powers at work that are deliberately trying to fuck with you. And the vast majority of the time, that's just not the case. Now, sometimes, depending on your situation, maybe it is the case. But the vast majority of the time, I think, we over-exaggerate and overblow these fears of hidden forces or whatever with aspects like the Mars-Pluto opposition that is being reactivated on November 7th. Okay, so I'll leave you with that for a moment. Okay. So our next development is on November 9th. And that is, as I bring us back to the noon chart, none other than Venus square Neptune. The Venus-Neptune square, November 9th. Okay. So this is a day where we really should be careful that our relationships and the way we relate to others is not pulled into the realm of confusion and illusion. Because when Venus, the planet of love and relationships and relating and socialization and beauty and harmony and all this, squares Neptune, the planet of confusion and illusion and all that is nebulous and mysterious, this can really make our relationships seem to be something they're not, or we can feel the stress of confusion when it comes to relationships. There's also a lot of times with Venus square Neptune, this temptation to escape into fantasy. And I think sometimes that's actually maybe not such a bad way to use that energy, as long as you don't overdo it. You don't want to live permanently in some fantasy realm. You want to come back to reality at some point. However, it reminds me of years ago when we had Venus transiting through Gemini, so not Sagittarius, but Gemini, and station retrograde square Neptune. And I saw a lot of people were kind of concerned about that. Well, I've got to be honest, dear viewers, for me personally, it was a good time, because, I'm not going to get into too many details about myself or my personal life, but, I discovered, let's say, a new way of playing one of my favorite video games around that time, and it was just delicious. It really was. And some other things happened too that were really pleasurable. So I don't mean to make you think, oh, Venus square Neptune, it's all bad and it's all confusion and everything. A lot of times it can be fun. It's just know that you might be tempted to escape into the pleasure of fantasy, and whether that's like a movie or TV show or a video game or whatever. And that's fine if you want to do that for a little bit. I think it can even be healthy to have a little escapism from time to time, as long as you don't get totally swept away with it and eventually come back to reality. you know, whatever the hell that is. All right. Let's check in on your comments. Get a sense that the Pluto-Mars opposition will be a collective issue rather than personal. It's possible. Please talk more about your personal life as well, LOL. Well, okay, maybe I will. Hang on a second. Let me see what happens if I pull this up here and then do this. Okay, I guess I shouldn't have done that. Hang on just 1 second. Gonna pull this back up and pull this back up and pull this back up. Let's get us back to November 9th with the Venus-Neptune square. Okay. So you want me to talk a bit more about my personal life? Well, all right. Since you asked, I'll mention just a little bit more, but I don't want to linger on it too much. So during that previous Venus-Neptune square, and again, unlike this one, since this one is just, it's kind of there and then it's gone on November 9th, this was Venus retrograde square Neptune, and in Gemini, and this was in like the spring of 2020, I recall, which I know a lot of other people weren't exactly having a good time then, but I kind of was, or at least in this area of my life I was. So not only did I discover a new way to play one of my favorite games, but I also was able to get this very computer that I'm using to make this stream right now. And yes, indeed, it is a gaming PC, but I didn't just get it for gaming. I got it for work as well, or whatever the hell you want to call this stuff that I'm doing right now. Because my previous computer, yes, I could live stream from it and I could make videos with it, but it was very, very bad. And any kind of gaming was just out of the question. So that was my experience of Venus retrograde square Neptune. It was I was having a lot of fun with Venus square Neptune. And I did come back to reality still. As an astrologer, I knew at the time, I was like, okay, we can't get carried away with this. But for me personally, that Venus square Neptune, I was like, I'm ready to escape into these other realms of, what can we say? Fairies and goblins and all kinds of fantasy creatures, and and have a lot of fun with that. So it's not always bad. It can be a lot of fun, but you do eventually have to come back to reality. And again, this time around on November 9th, this Venus square Neptune, it's only for 1 day. That's not like what we had in, the spring of 2020, Venus in Gemini retrograde square Neptune in Pisces. So, enjoy it while it lasts, I guess, November 9th. All right. The setup is nice. Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, believe me, I put a lot of time and effort into it. And sometimes now I wonder how the hell I was even able to do it. But keep putting one foot in front of the other in life, and eventually you get somewhere. All right. So our next main event is on November 11th. And that is none other than Venus entering Capricorn. And give me just one moment, please. Just going to bring that up for you. There it is. By 2 p.m. Eastern Time, November 11th, we have Venus in Capricorn. So this basically indicates a shift in our relationships, in how we experience pleasure and our feelings, and also when it comes to any artistic or creative endeavors and anything involving beauty as well. Venus, the planet of beauty. Let me think of how to describe this shift. So without being too depressing, because it's Venus in Capricorn. So just when we were enjoying the potentially delicious escapism, if it manifested for you that way, on November 9th of the Venus square Neptune, now it really is time to come back to reality on November 11th as Venus enters Capricorn. And we have to be, or we will find that our relationships and relating to others becomes much more serious and down to earth. And also our pleasurable pursuits become more serious and down to earth. That might sound like a contradiction, but allow me to explain. So, first of all, Venus doesn't exactly like being in Capricorn because, Venus is all about love and sweetness and beauty and all this stuff. And Capricorn is all stern and like we must have order and structure and discipline and everything. So Venus has to kind of struggle to still be able to accomplish relationships and relating to others and beauty and art and pleasure within those very strict confines and regulations of Capricorn. Now, here's something that I think really helps put this into perspective. Venus in Capricorn is like having to be more disciplined in order to attain pleasure. And I would argue, and I might be a little biased because I have a whole Capricorn stellium, but I would argue that the discipline to attain pleasure makes the pleasure all the better and more worthwhile. And here's the perfect example of that. So if you practice any kind of, if you have any kind of spiritual practice like meditation as I do, and that requires that you sit to meditate at the same time, ideally, every day, that takes a certain level of discipline. It's not always easy to sort of make yourself sit down and meditate at the same time every day, same time ideally anyway, and for the same set amount of time ideally every day. But when you do that, you find that in that meditation, you so often enter a state of great pleasure and satisfaction. And some people almost even enter a state of bliss. Now, of course, every meditation is different. And this is a live stream on astrology, not on meditation. But I just want to point out that that's the perfect example of what I mean when I say Venus in Capricorn is like having to be disciplined in order to attain pleasure. And there's also something I would tend to think, I don't know if other astrologers would disagree with this or not, but I notice with Capricorn energy, and again, I've got a ton of it myself, that there's very often this deliberateness to basically everything that Capricorn does. And so with Venus in Capricorn, there's a greater deliberateness in how we experience pleasure in our relationships, in creative endeavors, all of it. And so that is what we have with Venus in Capricorn. And let's check on you guys in the chat. Oh, you having Capricorn stellium, I definitely see that now that you mention. Yeah, it's pretty clear and obvious with myself. It is true. I'm stereotypical Capricorn stellium person. Now, the ruler of my ascendant is in Aquarius, and so I have a lot of that sort of, almost weird and detached and almost otherworldly Aquarian vibe to me as well. But it's still a Saturn-ruled sign and ruled by Saturn and Capricorn in my chart, for that matter. So yeah, I'm very, very Saturn-influenced indeed. Now, one other thing I wanted to mention with Venus into Capricorn is that pay attention to what happens on November 11th, because it is very often the day of a planetary ingress into a sign that an event manifests that is indicative of the type of energy or the type of events that will be occurring throughout the entire time that that planet transits that sign. And so, since I don't have it in front of me, we might as well just take a quick little look here. Move forward a week at a time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we're going to go back a little bit. Okay, looks like until about December 6th. And let's just do it like this. Okay, technically until December 7th, but like in those earliest minutes and hours of December 7th, you can see that Venus is at the very end of Capricorn right there. So, in other words, what this means is that on November 11th, when Venus enters Capricorn, a whole story or a whole saga begins in our lives that does not conclude until December 7th. And so that is what we have there. Now let's bring us back to November 11th, 2024. 12 p.m. Okay. All right. And now for our next event on November 12th, we have Mercury square Saturn. There it is. Okay, so this is pretty cut and dry. Mercury, the planet of our mind, communication, travel, technology, data, information, is coming up against a stressful square with Saturn, the planet of limitation. So this is a bit of a bump this day. We could come across communication or information that kind of gives us a reality check, or that is hard or difficult in some way. There may be something technologically related that challenges us. It's nothing too intense on the whole, but it is something that develops involving one or more of these things that kind of pushes us into new areas of activity regarding our thinking, reading, writing, studying, communication, mental activity, travel, technology, data, information, et cetera, all these Mercury things, as well as order, structure, limitation, authority, hard realities, a sober assessment of reality, I guess, that we see with Saturn. So that is November 12th. All right. I love Capricorns, though, being a Virgo. Nice. Yeah. Well, typically Capricorn and Virgo, both earth signs, do get along fairly well. There's that harmony of earth to earth, with Virgo, of course, being, while technically earth, like a very airy earth sign because ruled by air planet Mercury. All right. Our next event is on November 15th. It's a pretty big deal. And it is none other than the full moon in Taurus conjunct Uranus. And also that very same day, we have Saturn stationing direct. So full moon conjunct Uranus, this is where the lunar cycle of the month comes to a head. As we mentioned earlier, the new moon in Scorpio, the deep, dark, secretive, passionate new beginnings. This is where that energy comes into manifestation, into full maximum peak visibility. And the fact that it's conjunct Uranus, and we often get, seems usually once a year, a full moon conjunct Uranus, but sometimes maybe not, depending on where the full moons exactly take place each year and where Uranus is. But seems like we usually have a full moon conjunct Uranus once per year. This is expect the unexpected. This is a full moon where anything can happen. Sudden, shocking developments, sudden realizations of things. Uranus is like the lightning strikes and suddenly everything is illuminated where before you could see next to nothing. So what exactly is going to happen? I have no idea. That's the energy of Uranus. There's no way for me to know exactly for sure, but I do know that something will happen, something sudden and unexpected and probably very revealing in some way. Now, in addition to this, that very same day, November 15th, we have Saturn in Pisces stationing direct. You can see it right there. Saturn in Pisces stationing direct. And so this is something that really is, in terms of what we actually experience on the 15th, it's going to be very overshadowed by the full moon and those events. But it's very much worth noting, especially in terms of a big picture perspective, that in the background, matters relating to our order, structure, authority, limitation, hard realities, all of these Saturn things are shifting. They are moving or beginning to move forward again, whereas maybe they weren't moving forward quite so much before. And we will see this become more evident in the days and weeks and months to come. Things that perhaps have been held back in that area for some time and felt like there were delays, like we weren't making progress. Now we're going to start to make some level of progress, but again, gradually. This is a very gradual shift, but it is very much worth noting due to its more long-term significance. Okay. Our next major event is on November 16th, when we have the Sun opposite Uranus. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this because it's largely a continuation of what I just went over. Just as we had the full moon opposite Uranus, indicative of sudden, shocking, unexpected developments on the 15th, the Sun makes its exact opposition to Uranus on the 16th, and so expect that energy to continue into November 16th as well. So things are going to be unexpected on the 15th and on the 16th, simply put. And you could even say in another sense, it almost challenges us to awaken when the Sun makes its annual opposition to Uranus. Awaken to our true self or something, these solar significations. On November 18th, we have Mercury opposite Jupiter and the Sun trine Neptune. Okay, give me one moment for this one. Mercury opposite Jupiter is basically the idea that our mind, communication, or travel is challenged to expand or grow in ways that may be difficult or uncomfortable. So, as I alluded to earlier, one of the benefits that we have with Mercury transiting through Sagittarius right now, or at this point in the month, I don't know, for the vast majority of this month, is that even though Mercury is technically in its detriment, it's opposite one of its home signs, which means that it does not do as well in Sagittarius, it struggles in Sagittarius, it is also opposite its ruler Jupiter in Gemini, giving it mutual reception, which makes things easier for both Mercury and Jupiter. By contrast, Jupiter is opposite its home sign of Sagittarius. It's also in detriment in Gemini. So this is good both for Mercury and Jupiter. So as we are challenged to expand or grow when it comes to our thinking, communication, reading, writing, studying, this sort of thing, we should likely have an easier time of it than we otherwise would due to that mutual reception. So how can this manifest in terms of something more concrete? Well, Mercury is so often reading, writing, studying. Jupiter is so often knowledge and expansion of our worldview. A lot of us might feel motivated at this time or just feel an increased, magnetic pull, perhaps, attraction to reading and studying more that expands our minds, but also expands our knowledge and our worldview. In addition to that, both Mercury and Jupiter signify travel. Usually Mercury more short distance travel and Jupiter more like traveling the world or something of that nature. Well, as both signify travel, for those who are, especially for those who are of that disposition, this is an aspect that is challenging us to travel, and especially in ways that are perhaps new and maybe challenging us to travel to places we've never gone before. It's challenging us to go where we've never gone before, whether through actual physical travel or maybe even just the expansion of our mind when it comes to what we read about, study, talk about, think about, that sort of thing. So very interesting development indeed. Now, that same day, we have the Sun trine Neptune. So this is the radiance of the sun, our conscious mind or our conscious awareness, really lighting up the dreamy Neptunian realms. And so this is like a breakthrough when it comes to our sense of self and or our journey through life as it relates to imagination, illusion, spirituality, faith, belief, creativity, but also more negative things like confusion or even illness in some cases are significations of, or is a signification of Neptune. With it being a trine, I'm tempted to lean towards it being more positive. I mean, usually when the sun trines Neptune, I find those to be rather dreamy, almost magical days, but it really depends, of course, how it's hitting your chart. But just know that on November 18th, while we're also having that Mercury-Jupiter opposition challenging us to expand our mind or travel or whatever, we're also having some kind of a breakthrough into creativity or imagination or fantasy or that sort of thing. The sun now in late Scorpio. Okay, so on November 19th, we have none other than Pluto ingressing into Aquarius for the last time for every single one of our lives. And that is because Pluto has such a slow-moving, long-lasting cycle that it won't be for another 230 plus years that Pluto even returns to Capricorn. So between now and November 19th, Pluto is finishing up its business in Capricorn. It's unearthing of the dark side of the power structures, including things like government and banking and that sort of thing. And then it enters Aquarius, where it is going to unearth the dark side of all kinds of things, potentially. Everything from the internet to group mentality to the collective to technology, the fear of technology. But understand, of course, again, with something like this, it's not just about November 19th. This is a much bigger picture that is taking place. And once Pluto returns to Aquarius, which it's been back and forth between for the last year and a half approximately, retrograding back into Capricorn, then entering Aquarius again, back into Capricorn, and now finally entering Aquarius again, this time it's going to be there for almost another 20 years. I had to think for a moment. Couldn't believe I was saying that, but yes, it will be almost another 20 years until Pluto leaves Aquarius. So this is a very long-term transit that we're really not even going to get a proper idea of until we're at least several years into it, I think. However, we can make a few predictions. So first of all, understand that this is a shift unlike anything we've ever seen since 2008, when Pluto first ingressed into Capricorn. And we, of course, had the banking collapse or crisis or whatever it was, and the unearthing of even more dark and disturbing things about government and the power structure. These are all Capricorn things. So we had that major shift in the era in which we live. Now, with Pluto into Aquarius, we have a similar shift. And we've been in the transition period of this since, I believe it was March of 2023. So Pluto into Aquarius, what do I think it will be? I have a number of ideas, and I'll just go over them. Fear of technology, fear of the future, with Aquarius being very futuristic, fear of artificial intelligence, fear of the internet and the power of the internet and what that can do. fear of the collective consciousness and group mentality. And even Pluto, again, it digs up and unearths the dark side of things. It shows us the dark hidden side of whatever it comes into contact with generally, although at other times it actually conceals things. But very often, and I expect we will see this with Pluto and Aquarius, it reveals the dark, unpleasant side of things. And with Aquarius being such a group oriented and like collective conscious sign, I think that, and I'm not making any political statements here. This is a stream about astrology, and I have no interest in discussing politics. And I'm not taking any position one way or another here, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the years to come that if Pluto in Aquarius shows us the dark side of the mentality of putting the group and the needs of the many above the needs of the individual. Again, I'm not taking sides either way, not saying one is right and one is wrong or whatever. I'm just presenting what the astrology says to the best of my ability to interpret it. And I think Pluto in Aquarius over time will show us, especially probably for those who take a more pro-group stance and a more self-sacrificing stance, it may show them in particular, because they would be the ones who would be most unaware, for better or worse, of the dark side of such thinking, the pitfalls and the disadvantages, one way or another, of putting the needs of the group above that of the individual. Now, if this was Pluto in Leo, like 125 years from now or whatever it would be, if we were all still somehow alive then, I would be saying it would be unearthing the dangers of putting the needs of the individual above that of the group. Again, I'm not taking sides here. I'm just telling you what the astrology says. And so I think that'll be very interesting to see how that plays out in the years to come, literally. But also, even on November 19th, there may very well be an event that takes place that day that is representative of that Pluto and Aquarius energy. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens on November 19th. And remember that, as I alluded to earlier, now Mars is back on axis to its opposition to Pluto. So now Mars is opposite Pluto by sign again as of November 19th, with Pluto into Aquarius, and that just stirs that stuff up all over again. Those fears, the paranoia, the anger, the potentially people lashing out at what they fear, what is hidden, all of this kind of stuff. November 19th, it's going to come back into full swing, so be ready, is all I have to say. Sorry, I've just got to stretch out my arms. It's challenging to sit here for all this time and go over all this, but I'm doing it anyway because I enjoy it so much. Okay, so that is Pluto into Aquarius. How are you guys doing in the chat? Got yourself some food? You fear the future of your car technology. All of your cars are older than 12 years, the oldest being a 38-year-old Mazda. Oh, wow, that is an old car. Well, I suppose that would be more Mercury opposite Pluto, the fear of technology surrounding travel. We won't have that anytime soon, but we will eventually have Mercury conjunct Pluto. But certainly, Pluto transiting through Aquarius is definitely fear of technology, all right. So that is what we have there. And if we don't run out of time, because I want to try to wrap this up by midnight tonight, but if we don't run out of time, If you would like, Ryan, we could even look at your chart specifically at the end of the stream. And if you're comfortable with that, if you'd like any insight, as long as we're here going over this stuff. I want to have a brief discussion segment at the end of this, but I also got started a bit late tonight, so I don't honestly know if we'll have time or not, but hopefully we do. Okay. November 20th. On that day, we have the moon reactivating the Mars-Pluto opposition. So again, I'm not going to go too deeply into this because we just went over it, but just know that whereas on the 19th, the Mars-Pluto becomes on axis again, on the 20th, the following day, the moon is reactivating that and focusing it that much more into our immediate manifested reality. That's basically what the moon does. So that's November 20th. Let's see, how are you guys doing? Sure, I've been having a rough time trying to acquire a new job in my trade, industrial coding / painting. Yeah, I remember your comments on my videos. I'm sorry to hear you're having a rough time, but hopefully things will improve. I mean, I'm not going to lie, the energy is really rough right now, as we have been over. But, you know, it is what it is. There's always something crazy going on in the astrology, quite frankly. I mean, take it from me, having done this for going on 10 years now. Though, to be fair, sometimes some periods of time are more intense than others. All right. On November 21st, we have the sun ingressing into Sagittarius. All right, so as it does around this time of year, every time of year, the sun enters Sagittarius, thus Sagittarius season begins, and it takes place exactly by 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, November 21st, just rounding it to the nearest hour here, whatever. When the sun enters Sagittarius, there is a significant upliftment and optimism that we begin to feel. Whereas when the sun's in secretive Scorpio, I feel like this can best be understood by looking at the cycle of nature, particularly in the northern hemisphere when we have autumn and we have Scorpio season when the sun transits through Scorpio from mid-late October through mid-late November. And we have the leaves on the trees. They might be beautiful still for a little bit, but generally they're falling from the trees and dying because Scorpio is basically the sign of death. But it's really the sign of death and rebirth. And nature is at this point going into its transformational cycle, the death and rebirth cycle, preparing for winter, in other words. Now, when the sun enters Sagittarius, yes, there's this upliftment of our mood, and we're kind of more optimistic and looking forward to the future. And for many people, holidays are right around the corner, depending on what one celebrates. Different people celebrate different things. But for a lot of people, you know, maybe you celebrate Thanksgiving here in the US, or you celebrate Christmas like in late December, or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or whatever, all the different things. The holiday season is right around the corner. That's kind of that optimistic Sagittarian vibe. And even though technically, well, Christmas takes place during Capricorn season, there's this build up to that excitement for a lot of people. I know not everyone celebrates it. I'm just talking in general here. And even the exuberance and the gift-giving nature of Sagittarius is the type of manifestations I'm talking about here, especially with Sagittarius being a Jupiter-ruled sign, which is always just bestowing gifts. And if you really want to get right down to it with the Christmas connection, the idea of Santa Claus, maybe I should save this for next month, but I'll talk about it now, I guess, since it ties into what we'll be moving into here soon. Santa Claus is a very Jupiterian and Sagittarian figure. this very jolly, bearded man who is bestowing gifts upon the masses and, you know, just wants well-being for everyone, I suppose. And I suppose you could say, oh, well, he won't give you gifts if you've not behaved well. Well, I guess that's the influence of Saturn coming in when we begin Capricorn season, but maybe we can talk more about that next month. So anyway, that's what we have. Sun into Sagittarius. Also understand that it's a mutable sign, so it really represents the transitional period between autumn and winter. So as we enter into this time of the year, late November, and for most of December, it may not officially be winter yet. It's still technically autumn, but it kind of feels like it's in between. And that's because of that is due to the mutable nature of Sagittarius. We're transitioning from autumn to winter. And so there you have it. That's my delineation regarding that. Now, on November 23rd, we have the moon trine Venus opposite Saturn. Let's get maybe a little bit of a better look at that here. You can see the moon opposes Saturn about 7 p.m., then trines Venus soon thereafter. This isn't too big of an event, but I mention it in passing because in the context of our day-to-day experience throughout the month, this could be an interesting day. Because on the one hand, we have the challenge of the moon opposing Saturn and having to deal with the authority, structure, order, limitation, hard realities of that. But on the other hand, the moon is trining Venus, with Venus still pretty closely sextile Saturn, as if to say that it is through the way that we relate to others and our creativity and beauty and harmony and aesthetic appeal and finding pleasure and satisfaction that we will meet more effectively the challenge of dealing with difficult limitations or hard realities. So this caught my eye when I was putting all of this together, because it's a very interesting day where it's like, on the one hand saying, oh, we're going to have to deal with something difficult, but on the other hand, but there's a way around it that actually leads us very much to something we want, and probably something very pleasurable and satisfying, at least for many of us. Again, it'll hit everyone individually depending on your chart. But yeah, I think November 23rd, not likely to be a major event, but an interesting day. Certainly a very interesting day. Don't forget the 22nd. Thank you for reminding me of that. Okay, so let's take a quick look at that. Go back to noon and go back to the previous day, the 22nd. So obviously I didn't take any notes on this beforehand, so I'm just gonna have to improvise here and just tell you what I see in the moment. Well, first of all, let me take a sip of tea first. The biggest thing that jumps out to me on this day is the moon square Uranus. And so we just had a full moon, as we mentioned earlier, on November 15th in Taurus conjunct Uranus, indicative of sudden, shocking, unexpected developments. Well, this could be, it is true, an echo of that. I don't expect the 22nd to be as intense as the 15th, but certainly the moon square Uranus, it's the stress of dealing with sudden, shocking, unexpected occurrences. And it's interesting also that as the moon squares Uranus, it's moving into another square with the sun, just having recently entered Sagittarius, forming a bit of a T-square. So it's reactivating the sun's opposition to Uranus. It's then through the T-square formation, pushing us into the Aquarius part of our charts, which is where Pluto now is. we could maybe, I wouldn't guarantee it, as it's just too fuzzy to be completely certain, but we might see a bit more of a reactivation of the Mars-Pluto that day that we've been over. And interestingly enough, let's see if we go back here a bit. We have Venus forming a sextile with Saturn right here at about 7 a.m. Eastern time, but it'll be with us all day. So normally in this context, I wouldn't pay too much attention to sextiles because they're not as powerful, but in the interest of this day specifically, as long as we're going over it, Venus sextile Saturn is like saying, oh, you want this thing? Here's a way, or here's an opportunity through which you can get it. Venus is what we want. It is our desires, what makes us feel good. Saturn is the authority that either permits or does not permit what we want. Now, when Venus forms a supportive sextile to Saturn, it's like saying, oh, the authority is more agreeable on this day to our getting what we want. Now, does it always manifest exactly like that? Not necessarily. Venus sextile Saturn, from Saturn's point of view, is also quite beneficial because as Saturn, how do I put this, receives the benefic influence of Venus, Saturn is like, now I can accomplish what I'm trying to do more effectively as well, which Saturn is interested, of course, again, in facilitating and maintaining order, structure, the status quo, discipline, this sort of thing. So if that is the type of person you are, as I undoubtedly am, order and structure is the name of your game, November 22nd should be quite beneficial in that regard. But then again, we have to go back to the moon square Uranus. It doesn't mean there won't still be a potential destabilization. So I don't know what to tell you other than that's what the astrology literally says. On the one hand, in one area, there's greater support for stability and order and structure. But in another area of our lives with the moon square Uranus, there's some potential for destabilization. That's literally what the astrology says. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of the 22nd. And next on November 25th, let's move forward to there. We have Mercury stationing retrograde in Sagittarius. Okay, so this is it. Everyone panic. We're all doomed. The sky is falling. Run for cover. It's the end of the world. Mercury's going retrograde. Obviously, I'm kidding. I always point out, and you'll know this if you've watched some of my other videos perhaps, if you've heard me talk about this before, I think people freak out way too much over Mercury retrograde. I personally rarely discover it to be anywhere nearly as catastrophic as most people make it out to be. First of all, no two Mercury retrogrades are alike. Let me give you my best analysis of this. No two Mercury retrogrades are alike because every single Mercury retrograde is going to take place in a different location. It's going to have different aspects to different planets, and it's going to hit everyone's chart differently as well. So I guess that would be my second point, is that every Mercury retrograde is going to hit everyone's chart differently depending on your personal planets. And really, a far more accurate way of thinking about Mercury retrograde would be it is a time of extended focus on a particular given area of life. In other words, whatever the Sagittarius part of your chart represents for you, that is where this Mercury retrograde is really going to focus your energy and attention into, particularly when it comes to your communication, mental activity, or travel. And so that includes everything you read, write, study, talk about, think about, data, information, technology, all of this kind of stuff. There's an extended focus and emphasis on that area. It is its own unfolding story that takes a good number of weeks, usually about 6 weeks, I believe it is, or so, to fully unfold, because you don't just have the 3.5 weeks of the Mercury retrograde. You also have the lead up to the Mercury retrograde, the pre-shadow period, and then you have the post-Mercury retrograde shadow period. So where Mercury first travels through the area in the zodiac through which it will retrograde, then it makes the actual retrograde, and then it stations direct and travels again through that same area that it just retrograded through. So it's this extended story and focus and emphasis on a particular area of your life. Some Mercury retrogrades will retrograde into different signs. So like, for example, if this one did, it would go from Sagittarius to Scorpio. However, this one does not. This one takes place entirely in the sign of Sagittarius. And so we have all of that. Again, as I mentioned earlier, and it bears repeating now, there is the fact that Mercury is opposite its ruler Jupiter the entire time during this Mercury retrograde, with Jupiter in Gemini. Thus, it benefits from that mutual reception. Thus, my prediction is that this Mercury retrograde, while I suppose you could make the argument that it might be challenging in certain other areas because it does have to deal with that square to Saturn. On the other hand, it's going to benefit from that mutual reception with its ruler Jupiter in Gemini. So how difficult will this Mercury retrograde be? Well, I would prefer to study it even more deeply before I gave you an absolute definitive answer. And when I get to this point in my daily overviews, we'll look at it more clearly and specifically. But from where I stand now, I would say it has overall about a medium level of difficulty. This is not a Mercury retrograde that I would freak out about, even though I'm sure there will be people who, for whatever reason, want to make it seem like, ooh, it's, at this point in time in human history, there's a Mercury retrograde as well, and it's stirring up more drama and blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, it is square to Saturn, I will admit, so there is a certain bumping up against difficult limitations, but even then, it's in the superior position of that square, which gives Mercury the upper hand. So the implication is that whatever difficulties we experience, basically later this month and into next month, will be surmountable. These will be surmountable challenges. So I just have to present this as accurately as I can. I'm not interested in all of this fear mongering, I guess. I'm not interested in all of this dramatization of things and over dramatizing things when that's just not what the astrology says. I'm just going to, as always, attempt to present it as accurately as possible. Sometimes sometimes the dramatization is accurate when the astrology truly matches it. Right now, at least for this specific development with Mercury, I'm saying it does not. And if I'm wrong, then I guess we'll find out, won't we? Okay. Thanks. You are welcome, Garvino. You are welcome. On November 27th, we have the Sun trine Mars and Venus square Chiron. So let's take a look here. These are two pretty important events manifesting both on the same day or taking place on the same day. Soon after 3 a.m., November 27th, Eastern Time, we'll have that Sun trine Mars. This energizes everything from our action to our motivation to anger to assertion and aggression. This is like a day where we're much more likely to feel ready to act on something. especially something that maybe we've been thinking about acting on for a while. We feel increased motivation. And with that Sun in Sagittarius and Mars in Leo, there's such an exuberant and almost rambunctious energy to this that is just like saying, yes, we can do it. We can push forward. We can make it happen. And also, it's interesting when you notice that it is trine, both the Sun and Mars are trine the North Node in Aries, forming an entire grand fire trine with that. Now, the North Node so often signifies this idea of great hunger. There's this hunger and craving. And I feel like the danger this day, potentially, if there is any, is that we may be overconfident, basically, that we can do something or take on something that is actually just too much, that is just biting off more than we can chew. And we have that North Node hunger for it. On the other hand, if we are careful to not bite off more than we can chew, the locking into the nodal axis in that way could facilitate very interesting rendezvous with other people, even fateful developments, even things that connect into our past or our future. As I've said in my overviews, the nodes of the moon are like portals or vortices to other times and places, other realms. And so how this locks into that, and if you really want to be technical about it, it also locks into the South Node, forming a kite formation. We could feel increased motivation to take action on something that is connected to our past, present, or even our future. November 27th, very interesting day. Now, we're not done with this day yet, because we also have the Venus Chiron square, which really is not until almost the very end of the day. As you can see, we get to midnight on what is technically the 28th, but night of the 27th or the 28th, whatever you want to call it. Certainly throughout the 27th, this energy will be building up. Venus square Chiron, this can be kind of difficult and painful, I'm not going to lie. This is like saying that our relationships are being stressed by something surfacing relating to our unhealed wounds or hurts or pains from the past or things of this nature. So, in our interpersonal relationships, and not just romantic relationships, but any kind of relationships, this is where some things could be stirred up, and they might be kind of painful or hurtful. And just to give you an idea of maybe what to expect, Venus makes a hard aspect to Chiron, that being a square conjunction or opposition, 4 times a year. So it's not extremely uncommon, but it's also not extremely common. This is where something can get stirred up. Now, my advice when it comes to this, and this isn't astrological advice per se, though it ties in, but it's much more to do with my own unique philosophy, is that if something is stirred up at this time that is painful in relationships, well, then that's your signal to do some work on that. Maybe you need to do some energy work or some inner shifting, or maybe you need to set some boundaries with someone, or maybe you need to find a different way of looking at something that does not hurt you so much. In other words, if something painful comes up with the Venus Chiron square, I believe that is challenging you to see if you can look at the thing that is causing you pain in another way, in a way that is not so painful and that allows you to find greater peace with a situation, whether it's a situation that's happening now or it's from your past, or even if it's something you fear in the future. And again, what's kind of nice with this, we mentioned this earlier in a different context with the Mercury-Saturn, is that Venus is in the superior position of this square with Chiron, suggesting that, as cliche as it sounds, love will win in the end, or relationships, as signified by Venus, will overcome whatever this challenge is. And it's also an opportunity, keep in mind, again, I wouldn't fear this. I personally am not really afraid of stuff like this. I look at it as an interesting challenge. This is a point where you can really learn something valuable about yourself, about someone else, or whatever, because that's also what Chiron is all about, learning and teaching. I guess it's kind of become a cliche to say, but people call it the wounded healer. And maybe that's an oversimplification, but it kind of works. So try to emphasize that, learning what you need to learn, or helping to teach something, or whatever. All right. How are you guys doing? Put on some Sega Saturn. Nice. NASCAR 98 while I listen to the stream. Nice. Well, thank you for being here, Ryan. I appreciate it. And thank you, Garvino, and anyone else who is watching, listening actively. I definitely appreciate your support. So the final event we'll look at is actually not until December 1st. As I mentioned earlier, there's that new moon in Sagittarius. Like, even though it technically perfects in December, I want to mention it because as we're ending the month, we're building up to this new moon in Sagittarius. And of course, we'll talk more about it next month when we come to it. But this is another new beginning, a much more optimistic seed that is planted at this time. And it's interesting because though it is optimistic, it also does have that square to Saturn to contend with. So optimism, but there's still some hurdle to overcome involving authority, structure, order, limitation, whatever. But again, I don't want to focus too much on that right now because that's really more into December. I mean, in some time zones, I guess it's still November, whatever. I plan to look at it more in December. And so, dear viewers, that is it for our delineation in detail. Now, I think what I'm going to do here, since we are coming up on midnight Eastern time, but I don't want to end the stream just yet. Just switch this back here. I think what we're going to do is we're going to take just a little break. I'll give myself some time to get refreshed, and then we'll have a very brief wrap up segment. And if you have any additional comments or questions, we can go over those at that time. Otherwise, I'll just give a few concluding remarks, and then that'll be it. Now, I will display the astrological clock live for right now while we do this in just a moment. But also, please don't hate me, but since I am going to take a break briefly, I am going to gasp, insert an ad at this point in the stream. Now, that's only because I'm not going to be doing anything anyway. So if you don't like it, you can click off the stream, I guess. But I'll have you know, by the way, YouTube tried to get me to make it so ads would regularly play for you guys throughout the stream, just no matter what. And I was like, no, I don't want to put my viewers through that. I'll just insert one if I'm going to take a break or something. And so that's what I'm doing here. So just switch this over. So I just want you guys to know that I'm not trying to make you watch pointless ads or whatever. I'm only playing one now because I'm not going to be doing anything anyway. It's just going to be the astrological clock, the live astrological clock on the screen, So you're not really missing anything. So, okay. At least I hope this doesn't cause it to glitch. If it glitches, I don't know, we'll figure it out. Okay. Looks like it's still working in front of me. All right, so I will be right back after this short break. Okay. I am back, dear viewers. Give me just a second here. Get things pulled back up. Okay, looks like we're back. So, at this point, I'm just going to give, like I said, some concluding remarks. And if there are any comments or questions about the month or anything that is astrologically relevant, you can leave them in the chat. Let's see, Ryan, what did you say? I got a DoorDash delivery ad and an AMS oil ad. Do I use both products? Yes, I do. Okay, well, I'm glad you, at least you use both products. That's not too bad then. All right, so see if I can get some more light on my face here. Let's see. Okay, there, that helps to a certain extent. So in conclusion here about November, it's, like I said at the start of the stream, it's a very dynamic month. There's a lot going on, a lot of changes that will affect us for literally not just days or weeks, but also months, years, even decades to come in the case of Pluto entering Aquarius. And then in the more immediate but somewhat extended future with the Mars-Pluto opposition, we have that through next spring. So that ongoing fear of what is deep and dark and hidden and powerful, but also that anger and aggression and even paranoia and temptation to possibly lash out at it is something that's going to be with us for quite some time to come. And I also want to point out with that, can't remember if I went over this earlier or not, but it's worth mentioning. It's also the peak of the Mars-Pluto cycle. So if we look at the Mars-Pluto specifically, just those two planets, we have the beginning of the cycle at the conjunction, and then we have different stages as it moves towards, in particular, the opposition. That's the peak point that it's at now and will be for at least a couple more months to come. And then we have the waning stage back towards the next conjunction, marking the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. So just like a full moon is the moon at its furthest, most extension point from the sun, and thus it really stirs up our emotions and all kinds of things can happen on a full moon. This is like a full Mars, but a full Mars opposite Pluto. You know, it's the cycle tracking how our anger interfaces with our fear. It's the anger-fear cycle. And it's also, you could call it maybe the paranoia cycle, the deep, dark emotion cycle might also be accurate. As we reach the Mars-Pluto opposition, it's the peak point of that cycle. It's when those two forces, anger, Mars, and fear, Pluto, are at their farthest point apart, stretched as far apart as it gets. Now, you could say, to be fair, okay, Saturn is also fear, whatever, but every cycle is its own unique thing, its own unique energetic frequency or signature. And so we're at that peak point, again, not just right now, but it's so interesting. As a result of the upcoming Mars retrograde, we are like stuck at that point for an extended period of time, for months to come. And so, you know, I know people will want to look at this in terms of the world at large and the bigger picture. And I guess, well, I mean, obviously that's applicable. I'm not really too interested in talking about that kind of stuff because I feel like it stirs up all kinds of potentially distracting things. But yes, indeed, this very intense energy of fear of what is deep, dark, and powerful, and anger and aggression towards those hidden, powerful forces is most active over the months to come and most fitting for what we see, or at least what we are told is going on in the world at large. And it is my suspicion that we are probably only being told a fraction of what is in reality going on. And depending on who you ask, that might be a fraction of a fraction of a fraction. It might be a tiny little sliver that we are given of actual real reality. So, with all of that said, I will now be happy to take any comments or questions. And, well, I did want to wrap this up by midnight, but I'm down to stay for a little bit longer. Probably won't get this chance until about next month. So I want to do it now. Wish I could get more light on my face more easily, but oh well, we'll just have to live with this. Let's see. Qualified for the upcoming opening race, 18th out of 24. I've had worse placements in NASCAR games. Nice. Well, there's, we're feeling Mercury's proximity to Sagittarius already. Hope you're doing okay, Mr. Poetic. Thank you. I'm doing fairly well. I hope you're doing well, Ryan. Things are intense, but mostly doing well. I mean, the fact that I'm even doing this live stream right now tells you that things sure as hell have changed for me. If you want to look through my chart, I don't mind. Hell yeah, let's do it. Now, Ryan, do you want me to pull up your chart for the stream? And again, that would show your birth location and stuff like that. Or do you want me to leave it off? Because I'm totally fine if you want me to leave it off stream. Or I could even pull it up and hide your name or the time you were born or anything you want, I guess. You're fine with my pulling up the chart? Okay, cool. Then we might as well do that. And positive spirits despite my financial situation currently. Okay, well, yeah, that's really the key thing though, isn't it? Is trying to maintain a positive mindset despite the current manifestation. And that's how I believe you really get things to change. All right, so what we're gonna do now with the brief amount of time that remains is we're gonna pull up Ryan's chart. Let's see. Best way to do this is probably, hang on just a second. Gonna switch this over. There I am, and here's Ryan's chart. Should be displaying now. Yes, there it is. Good. All right. So, I think I'm going to pull up the comments on my tablet because that'll be easier. Or the comments, the chat, whatever. All right, so yeah, Ryan, ask away. Any questions that you have about your chart or what's going on in your life right now? I'll be happy to go over them. I know earlier you mentioned some issues with your car. And let me take a look here. So very often what we're going to see with that, let's see, I could probably even pull up the, could display the angles, but I don't know if, Ryan, do you know if your birth time is exact or is it a rounded time in estimation? I guess the biggest question would be employment possibilities. Yes, well, let's take a look here. And I'm just doing this on the fly, so bear with me. You think it's a rounded time? Okay, then we'll just leave the angles turned off because they might distract us. But we are relative. I remember because we've talked live before about your chart. That's how I already have it in my database for anyone else who watches this and wonders. We already are virtually certain that you're a Libra rising, as am I, by the way. So let's take a look here. Can't fix any of my cars, daily driver, my 2 projects with our some income. Spent many years of my charting into it. That's true. That's true. So in terms of employment possibilities. Okay, well here's the thing. I'll give you the lowdown on this, as they say, in a very what should hopefully prove to be a very clear and focused way. So you are in your Saturn return right now. As you can see, you have this Saturn at 12 degrees of Pisces. It's also where you have your moon, which is the ruler of your 10th house of career and public image. So you have Saturn and the moon in your 6th house of work and day-to-day activities and all that. This talks about your work life. You have the moon ruling your career and public image. That has more to do with your reputation, but it does that from your 6th house of work and day-to-day activities. So the Saturn return is something that everyone goes through usually twice, sometimes 3 times in their lives. I mean, I guess, well, yeah, we have your birthday displayed on screen, so I'm assuming you don't mind my, sort of alluding to what your age is. So everyone goes through their first Saturn return from about the age of 27 to 30. It varies slightly depending on the exact Saturn placement, but about the age of 27 to 30. And then again in like the late 50s, and then again in one's 80s, because Saturn has almost, but not quite, a 30-year cycle. It's like 29 and a half years. So you're 30 currently? Yes, well, I guess you would be as I look at your birthday. Yeah, and so for you, Ryan, here's the thing. You have likely been struggling with this particular theme one way or another ever since Saturn ingressed into Pisces, which I believe was March of 2023. Now, let's see if there's an ideal way in which I can do this. Yeah, let's just switch over real quick to this chart, and we'll just animate this. Well, after I fix this little glitch, we will. Okay. And we're gonna pay attention here to Saturn at 12 degrees of Pisces here on November 3rd, at least anyway, 12 Pisces 48. We're gonna go forward a month at a time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, now we're gonna back up a little bit. As you can see here, Saturn will last be in Pisces, or Saturn will finish its transit through Pisces, looks like May 24th or 25th of 2025. And let me get the exact time here real quick. Okay, sometime on May 24th, unless daylight savings time is fucking with us, but no, we're good. So May 24th, Saturn finishes its transit through Pisces. And so not only you, Ryan, but anyone and everyone who has Saturn in Pisces is currently experiencing that transit of the Saturn return. And this is a very big deal. And everyone goes through it, but no Saturn return is really exactly like anyone else's. But themes associated with the Saturn return are very much worth considering. And well, check this out. As we just saw on, actually, let's pull up the chart for November 1st. That's close enough. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Saturn's moving so slowly at this point. Saturn is at 12 degrees of Pisces right now. And then we look back at Ryan's chart, and where do you have it? 12 degrees of Pisces. So your Saturn return is like right there right now. It is exact and precise, at least down to the degree, not to the minute at this time, but that doesn't matter. It's at a peak moment. Now here's the thing. So you've been experiencing this since March of 2023. However, by late May of next year, 2025, this particular era of your life is going to be over, and you'll move on to what's coming next. And The Saturn return in general is typically associated with, what's the best way to put this? Astrologers usually refer to it as like the final entrance into adulthood. Now, I am a few years older than you. I guess I don't really give a fuck if people know my age, whatever. I'll be 35 in 2 months, so how about that? When I went through my Saturn return, I mean, I didn't know what the fuck I was doing for the most part. I learned a lot of things, and we can get into that at some point if anyone is curious. Though if you've been a viewer of my channel for a long time, you've probably seen a fair dose of it. But it's really like coming to terms with being an adult and knowing, especially as you like turn 30, that you're now having to leave the past behind. You're having to leave a certain era of your life behind that is never coming back. And just the sobering reality of that. You're having to leave your youth behind in a sense. Now, of course, different people have different opinions about this. Ask someone who's like 60 if they think 30 is old, and they'll be like, are you fucking kidding me? That's super young. So there's a lot of relativity, you know. I mean, at almost 35 years old now, I don't feel particularly old, although I don't exactly feel young either. So there's certainly an effect on it. Now, here's the thing. Everyone's Saturn return, though, is going to be influenced by the sign and house placement and aspects it makes to other planets and the rulership of the sign and house. And also what house or houses, or well, in this case with Saturn, it would be houses Saturn rules and the whole sign house system that I use. And so the point being with you, Ryan, is that your Saturn is in your 6th house of work and things of this nature. So obviously it's going to have to do with your work, but especially from a perspective of what is your daily life like, your daily schedule, your day-to-day activities, your routine. Also, health is a big 6th house thing. So all of these things can be activated. Now, it is very important to understand this as well. Your moon is at 19 degrees of Pisces, as you see right here. And as we can see here, let me animate things again. As time goes on, that Saturn is going to conjoin your moon at 19 degrees of Pisces around mid-February. And so that's like an additional flare-up of, I would say, really your Saturn return in general, but in this case relating specifically to your career and public image. Because again, the moon in your chart is Lord 10. And a lot of astrologers I can't say this for sure, but it's been my feeling or sense that I've gotten over the years is that a lot of astrologers won't talk about this for some reason. I guess they just practice other forms of astrology. I really don't know. But in the system I use anyway, the moon in Pisces in your 6th house is also Lord 10, which means it rules your career and public image, 10th house of career and public image as well. So when Saturn goes over that in mid-February, that's going to stir things up in that area. That's going to challenge you to do whatever you have to do to meet the requirements and responsibilities of your career and public image, if that makes sense. But it's likely also an event taking place in your work or health or schedule or day-to-day activities. It might also be a bit of a, how do I put this in simple terms? A bit of a depressing transit, but I wouldn't worry too much because you have a day chart, which means that Saturn is the malefic of the sect in favor, which usually refers to surmountable challenges as opposed to things that are much more difficult that you would typically find with Saturn in a night chart. In other words, as you can see in your chart, the sun is way up there in Gemini in the 9th house, well above the ascendant-descendant axis, the horizon, which we don't have visible right now, but it doesn't matter. So you very much have a day chart. So the most important thing I want you to hear is that these are surmountable challenges. that you are experiencing right now. And the best way to work with them, I believe, is to work with the energy of Saturn. You want to take as realistic of an approach as possible. You want to be willing to work hard and be disciplined. Now, don't overwork yourself. That can be very bad, but accepting hard work, discipline, and responsibilities will gain you Saturn's favor in a sense. And so these are very important things for you to know. And I mean, there's just so many more things I could say about this, but let me check on the chat here. Yeah, I'm 30, but I definitely don't feel 30. I can relate to that. Still trying to get a proper career going so I can start to do the traditional adult things. I don't know if I will ever get a proper career going, so I can, don't worry, you're not alone. And I'm well past my Saturn return now, so it's really bad, but I guess this YouTube thing is about as close as I get to with that, and I don't know, it's just going to have to suffice. Well, I've overcome some tough situations in the past. Good advice. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, the most important thing to understand is that it's something that everyone goes through and experiences in their own way. For some, the Saturn return is harder than for others. But, you know, I would even go so far as to say it's something that if you're really willing to work with it well, can be experienced with even a significant amount of almost joy and satisfaction. And there's going to be astrologers out there who are shocked that I would dare to say such a thing. But I guess to be fair, it comes kind of from some of my other beliefs and perspectives that aren't astrological, but they are what I believe, that you can focus yourself into peace and harmony with almost anything. I didn't say it was easy, but I said it's possible. I mean, I practice it myself every day. It's the only goddamn reason I'm even on here right now, even able to be on here right now, is because of my regular spiritual practices. They keep me from going insane. Never been afraid of hard work. Yeah, that is good. And with Saturn in the 6th, that also makes a lot of sense as well. You would be one who would be naturally predisposed to handle that. So it's also interesting when we look at this more in terms of how you make your livelihood. Well, then we're going to look at the second house, which for you coincides or overlaps with the sign of Scorpio, ruled by Mars. And as we went over throughout this forecast tonight, Mars is, of course, currently dealing with its intense opposition with Pluto in late Capricorn and soon to be early Aquarius. So this is like saying your money, values, and how you make money, how you make your livelihood is going through a really intense challenge right now because of the Mars-Pluto opposition. And it could even be said that it is being challenged to transform in deep and powerful ways at this time. And again, the Mars-Pluto is going to be with us through next spring. And interestingly enough, your Saturn return also concludes next spring. So that doesn't mean, here's the thing that people should also understand when working with astrology in this way. That doesn't mean that you should just sit back and do nothing and just wait for the planets to align because, well, I'm certainly not exactly an evolutionary astrologer. Some of my ideas maybe dovetail with those. It really has been my experience after nearly a decade of doing this that the way in which you work with the energy determines how it manifests for you. So that has to do with the way you focus and the thoughts that you think. It also has to do with your actions. There's a wide range of possibilities. In fact, Stephen Forrest, who is an evolutionary astrologer, in his book, The Changing Sky, which I have up on my shelf and I'm looking at right now, He called it, I believe, fields of probability. And even though I'm coming at it from a slightly different angle, I would say that's basically accurate. There are fields of probability constantly responding to your, dare I say, vibration, your energy, your actions, your thoughts, all of it. So no one is ever powerless in any of this. And that's what I really want to emphasize, because there are too many people that are just fatalistic about this stuff. All right, what else we got here? I'm trying to get a career in the trade of industrial painter, which that skill does run in my family. Oh yes, my money's definitely going through a tough time. Yeah, industrial painter, which with your being a Libra rising ruled by that Venus in Cancer in the 10th house of career and public image, and Libra so often being associated with aesthetic appeal and beauty and harmony and that sort of thing, Venus as well, that seems like it would be a fitting job for you. And notice how that Venus in Cancer and your 10th house of career and public image is closely trine your Saturn, which means that it's a very key part of your Saturn return, these like work challenges basically. So for what that's worth. Let's see. Just last year, I made about $85,000, the most money I've ever made within a year. Very nice. But I also tell through the banking cracks, credit score not high enough. Yeah, that is challenging because I tend to do well with my money. So I didn't ever use a credit card, but also couldn't get a loan due to my work hours at the time in late August, early September. Being too low, hence why I had to choose to quit due to low hours. So I couldn't get a loan, nor I was able to get a credit card. Oh, that sucks. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is necessarily the stream for me to voice this opinion, but I'll just say I think the whole system of credit is fucked. Maybe that's my having Uranus closely conjunct the IC in Capricorn. And these credit rating agencies, I think, are just atrocious. But that's a whole nother subject we don't need to get into. But I think it burns me up in a way at times. And I think it's so outrageous. It is so outrageous, dear viewers, that you have to have in today's world, like, good credit to be able to like buy a house and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it is outrageous because that means that unless you're willing to give the system what it wants, like submit to the system, basically. Now, maybe I've really got people wondering where I stand on some things, but it's like saying that unless you're willing to submit to the system, you can't do something as you would think would be fundamental as buying your own fucking house or a car or whatever. I mean, it's an obscenity. But a lot of people think, no, that's just the way it's supposed to be. And I say, I may have a Capricorn stellium, but I've got Uranus on the IC, Mars in Sagittarius, and Venus in Aquarius, and I don't fucking like it one bit. I don't like that that's the way the world works, that is. Anyway, unfortunately, dear viewers, I mean, this is a lot of fun and everything, but I've got to wrap it up. I'm going to try to come back next month. I'm going to try to come back at the end of every month and forecast each month from now on. No guarantees because, to be honest, these streams take a lot out of me, but they're also a lot of fun and I enjoy doing them a lot. And I hope you guys get something out of them too. So look forward to those. I'll continue working on the daily overviews, which, by the way, take a lot of time to get out. So I'm kind of, it's hard for me to make time to do a live stream because then it takes time away from working on those. But I'm pretty sure I can keep them coming out every day from now on. I'm like working 6 days a week now, or at least that's how I have it scheduled for myself. And I think with that, I can keep it going. And other than that, I guess that's about it. Appreciate all the info and help, Mr. Poetic. Thank you, Ryan, and good luck to you in all of your endeavors. I know for sure you'll make it through, especially with that Saturn in a day chart. and the benefits of that. But I'd be saying that regardless, really. So let me just switch my webcam back here real quick for the outro. All right. See if I can do this before my freaking 12:30 a.m. alarm goes off. Missed your live streams. They're always fun. Thank you for saying so. I appreciate that. I missed them too. I really did. And I mean, I'm not going to get into it right now because, quite frankly, I don't have time. But you know, I went through one hell of a transformation myself this year, like last year as well, but especially a lot into earlier this year. It would just be way too much to get into right now. There's not enough time. But I was at the point basically where I wasn't sure that I'd ever be able to do something like this again. So it's very deeply satisfying to me that I've been able to come back from that and return to you guys. And, you know, shit is hellish, but at the same time, I'm staying optimistic, and that seems to continue to fuel me to be able to do what I do. And there's really nothing else for me to do but be like do this astrology work that I love to do here on YouTube. So, you know, fuck it. I'm going to continue to do it, and whoever wants to watch can watch. So thanks again. I look forward to hopefully many more live streams to come, and I'll see you next time. Have a good night, everyone. Bye for now.